Hello, everyone. Sonia Liebendorfer here, and I wanted to start on Alzheimer's disease for you. This is going to be a very difficult presentation because there really is no cure for Alzheimer's. So, this information is just like very difficult to go through because there's really not a whole lot of rays of sunshine and hope throughout this entire thing. So I'm going to be breaking it up into different parts because there is so much information out there, and I want you to have a good grasp and a good understanding of it. So, in this first section today, I'm pretty much going to be going over the signs of the disease as well as the causes of the disease. And there's a whole bunch of good information if you have a family member with this. On the Mayo Clinic's website, they have a bunch of clinical trials that they're doing. They're trying to check DNA and learn more about the disease. So if you have a family member that's willing to participate, they do have studies ongoing. You can see if there are studies in your area for the research. So without further ado, please remember to like and subscribe if you run across anything that you learn in this presentation, because I'm doing this for you and for your benefit. So if I'm not getting any likes and any subscribes, then I know I'm not doing a good job. So well, make sure you let me know if I'm doing a good job for you by hitting that like and subscribe button. All right, guys, let's get started. All right, the first thing that I want to cover is that Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia. They have it rated as 60 to 80% of the cases of dementia that are diagnosed are Alzheimer's related. Now, they describe it as a continuous decline in thinking, behavioral, and social skills that disrupt a person's ability to function independently. So that is the formal definition that they have for it. And now we're going to start going into some of the signs of the disease. Okay, well, what are some early warning signs that you may have the disease? If you start forgetting recent events or forgetting conversations that you had with people, then that's one of the early warning signs. A person with Alzheimer's will develop severe memory impairment and lose the ability to carry out everyday tasks. Now, the cause of Alzheimer's disease is the wasting away of the brain cells that result in brain cell death. It is a progressive disease for which there is no cure. Current medications that they have for Alzheimer's may temporarily improve symptoms or slow the rate of decline, but there is no cure. There is no treatment that they have found that will alter the disease process in the brain. They believe that Alzheimer's is caused by a combination of genetic, lifestyle, and environmental factors that affect the brain over time. Less than 1% of Alzheimer's is caused by a specific genetic change that will guarantee a person is going to develop the disease. And these cases usually happen in middle age. So that would be your early onset. The exact causes are not fully understood, But brain proteins fail to function normally and disrupt the work of the brain cells and unleash a series of events that result in damage of some cells, lost connections between the cells, and this results in cell death. Now, this sounds very familiar to the housekeeping analogy that I made with Parkinson's disease, doesn't it? Well, it turns out that it is the same kind of problem, but with different proteins. So we're going to get into that because I find this interesting that again it's a housekeeping problem. The things that are created in the cells called macrophages that are supposed to be the housekeepers and the cleaner uppers that go behind and clean everything up so there's no debris anywhere. Apparently, as you get older, these start to not function properly because this is another disease where we see the housekeeping of the brain is a problem. All right, they say the damage actually starts in the region of the brain that controls memory. But the bad news is this process starts years before the first symptoms ever start showing up. So, this loss of brain cells, called neurons, spreads in a predictable pattern to other regions of the brain. And by the late stage of the disease, whenever you do a CAT scan on a person that has this, their brain size has shrunk significantly. Now, they say there's basically two proteins that are to blame for the housekeeping issues in Alzheimer's. First of all, there are plaques. For whatever reason, there's something called beta amyloid, which is a leftover fragment of another protein. And for whatever reason, these little things get deposited and left behind. And when these fragments start clustering together, they have a toxic effect on the brain cells. And they start affecting the ability for them to communicate with one another as to what's needed and what needs to be done. Then there's also something called tau proteins that play a part, and they change shape and they change their organization into tangles. So just think about whenever you get a tangle of hair, that's what I associate this with. If you get a tangle of hair, you can't run the comb through your hair. Well, if you get a tangle of this, it disrupts the transport system and you can't get the nutrients to that part of the brain. And what happens if the brain doesn't get the nutrients? That part of the brain dies because it can't get nutrition anymore. Now, about the only bright spot in this whole presentation is the fact that there are preserved skills that they need to be encouraged as much as possible to keep the person interacting as much as possible for as long as possible. And this includes reading and telling stories and singing and listening to music, dancing, drawing, or doing craft work. My mother still plays the piano beautifully because she still has that capacity in her brain. But you have to just keep the parts of the brain active that they still have. Otherwise, they're going to end up losing that quickly too. So, what happens with Alzheimer's disease? Well, as the disease progresses and they get into the late stages, they're going to reach a point that they're not really able to communicate. They're going to reach a point that they can't really bathe or take care of themselves anymore. They're going to be incontinent. It's going to be like taking care of a baby because they're not going to be able to take care of any of their own personal needs. And so people that end up in that last advanced stages often die from dehydration because they can't eat or drink. They forget how to eat and drink. And they have malnutrition from they forget to eat and drink. They forget that they need to stop and get nutrition. They lose interest in it too. Or they can get a really bad infection, either a lung infection, pneumonia, or a really bad UTI. And those are common in these patients because of the incontinence. If they're not changed regularly, then all of that urine setting up infection in that diaper causes them to have problems with infection, especially if they're not changed often enough. So it's important to make sure that soiled diapers are changed promptly in these patients. All right, well, let's go over some of the signs that you need to be looking for with a loved one to see if they have Alzheimer's disease. First, you have the repetition. They repeat statements to you over and over and over and over and over, and repeat questions, the same questions over and over and over. They forget they have a conversation. They'll call you multiple times a day. They forget about appointments. They forget about certain events, birthdays and stuff. They don't remember that anymore. And they will misplace things. And then they put things in really abnormal places. I remember a good example of that is my dad told me before he passed away that my mom was slipping. And I asked him, well, why do you know this? And he said, because instead of just cutting up my apple slices for me and just putting them in the refrigerator when I'm ready for them, she put the sliced apple slices in the china cabinet. And he said, so I realized that she's slipping and you're really going to have to watch her once I'm no longer here. Well, my mom kept things hidden for a long time as far as her decline, but when it became obvious is when things were really to a point that it was time for somebody to take over. So if you get them to a point that you're worried about them driving, then I encourage you to get a GPS device and don't let them know that you're putting it on their car because it says they will get lost in familiar places. My mom drove on the wrong side of the road down the road and didn't realize she was on the wrong side of the road until somebody was coming at her head on. So I encourage you to get one of these GPS devices. They usually have subscription services for like $20 a month. And you put the GPS on there, don't let them know that it's on there. But when that GPS device is on there, every time they get in that car and they start to roll, guess what? You're going to get a notification on your phone that they're out driving. And you can just watch the spaghetti pattern of everywhere they go that they try to figure out where they're going and what they're trying to get done because none of it'll make sense. Then you'll notice they're going way off track. I can remember we had a person that came into the ER that the family didn't know that they had a memory problem because they were still living alone. But then the police brought the person in because they had just stopped on the railroad tracks. They knew they were supposed to do something at the railroad tracks, but they didn't remember what they were supposed to do. So they literally stopped on the railroad tracks and then was arguing with officers as to why they shouldn't get off the tracks. because they couldn't put the pieces of the puzzle together. So those are the kinds of things that I'm talking about. If you just see behavioral things that are just out of the norm, don't set it aside. There's a reason to question it. Then you'll notice that they forget the names of family members and they forget everyday objects that they're used to working with all the time. They can't remember the name of them. Then you'll notice that they have trouble talking. They have trouble expressing what they're trying to say because they can't find the right word. All these are warning signs for you that something is going on. It may not be Alzheimer's, but until you get testing done, you're not going to really know what you're dealing with. Because in the early stages, most of these have the same type symptoms. And what are some other signs that we can look for? Well, there's difficulty concentrating, difficulty thinking, especially anything to do with numbers becomes difficult. Abstract concepts. They can't grasp a hold of what you're talking about if you try to give them something abstract to think about. Multitasking becomes increasingly difficult. It becomes challenging to manage finances, balance checkbooks, and pay bills on time. This is one thing that I noticed about my mother after my father passed away in 2013. She quit balancing her checkbook the normal way. She started keeping notebooks of all of the different transactions on her accounts. And so she would just go in and put a check mark by the ones that cleared the bank each month. And that had been going on since 2015, and I didn't know it. So I think my mom may actually have both Alzheimer's and vascular because both her mother and her sister had it. But when I took her for the evaluation to be diagnosed last year, they only said that she had vascular. So I'm still inclined to believe that she has both because this has been going on for such a long period of time. And Alzheimer's is the slowest of the progressing dementias. The others are much more fast in terms of decline. So I think she has both, even though they did not diagnose her with Alzheimer's. The situation, signs, and symptoms and everything are there. They reach an ability to make reasonable decisions and judgments. You'll notice they can't make a rational decision about anything because there is no rational thought process. They can't reason. And because they can't reason, they get defensive. So if you notice them making uncharacteristic choices, I noticed my mom started donating to every single organization that was requesting money from her, from the Red Cross to every Easter Seals, every single charity was asking her for money, and she was sending money to all of them. Then you will also notice uncharacteristic choices in social interactions. They will just blurt out and say things that are very inappropriate and very hurtful. You may notice that they start wearing clothes that are inappropriate for the kind of weather that we're having. You may notice they start having problems with burning food on the stove. One of the first things that I recognized with my mom was she quit cooking. And she was always wanting me to bring her something to eat. And I didn't mind doing it because I wanted to make sure she did eat something. But the unexpected driving situation with her driving down the wrong side of the road, when I contacted the police wouldn't do anything. They said she's got a valid driver's license, there's nothing wrong with her license, and we can't take it away. And I said, well, something's got to be done. She can't drive anymore. Obviously, her judgment is off to the point that she doesn't know which side of the road she's driving down. That's when I made the appointment to go see the neurologist and had him to recommend her taking a driver's course for dementia patients, which she failed. And that's how we got rid of the driver's license, is they had to tell her that she didn't pass the test. Now, some more of the signs you need to look for is that daily routine activities are going to become more of a struggle. You'll find that just getting dressed and bathing become a problem. They have to have assistance with that. Then you'll notice personality changes. They all of a sudden don't want to go to church anymore because they're worried about people realizing that they're not as sharp as they used to be. You will notice that they get depressed, they have crying spells, but yet they can't tell you what they're upset about. They can get apathetic and just don't care about anything. They can have mood swings. They can just go off on you without you even expecting it. They can throw stuff at you. That's been my experience. Um, they have severe distrust in other people. They become very paranoid. They can get very irritable, especially with their sleep habits. If they get once those start getting messed up, they really get weird. They can be very aggressive. Now, the changes in the sleeping habits. There's something called sundowners, that it's when a person actually comes alive when the sun goes down. Instead of winding down, they wind up. Their days and nights get mixed up. So whenever that starts happening, that you start having problems with wandering. These are the people that get out at night and wander the neighborhood, and their loved ones don't even know that they're out wandering. And you happen to see people that are elderly walking in the streets at night in their pajamas. I used to see that coming home from the hospital in the morning. I would work until 3 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I would be coming home from work and I would see elderly people in their PJs walking down the street. And I was like, okay, well, I wonder where this person is supposed to be. Um, and then you'll see some that have total loss of inhibition and they're just walking around naked without any regard because the inhibitions are gone. That part of their brain is gone. Um, they'll have delusions. They'll think they see people and see things and think that people are out to get them. Think somebody's stolen something that they've misplaced. All that becomes huge issues. And I'll give you an example of that. My mom charged, this is when I really knew that her finances were out of whack. My mom charged a recliner on her credit card, and then she started complaining to me that she got a bill for the recliner and it was 800 and something dollars, and she knew she was only supposed to spend $200 for it. Well, I don't know when she's thinking she bought a recliner, what year she thinks she bought it, but I know dadgum well that a recliner is not $200. So I ended up having to take her to the furniture store and show her where she signed the receipt to pay 800 and something for the recliner. And that was indeed her signature because she was trying to say that somebody had fraudulently made the charge. And that was not the case. She was trying to say I made the fraudulent charge. And that was not the case. So whenever you start having problems like that, that you have to start pointing them out to them and say, look, this is your signature. You signed for this. This is your chair. This is where you signed for it to be delivered. You signed delivery on it. It's sitting in your living room. You committed to pay this 800 and something dollars. Well, I just thought it was 200 something. The 200 something was for one of those life alert things. That's what the $200 was. But she forgot that she had purchased that and she thought it was supposed to be the cost of the recliner. So once you start seeing haywire stuff like that start showing up, just be aware that, this is a sign that it's time for you to take control of affairs and take control of the situation. And hopefully, you'll already have some paperwork in place because it can be a nightmare when you don't have that in place and you start trying to do this all after the fact, which is what happened with us because she didn't have any of this done because she didn't think she needed it. But it ended up being needed and it ended up being a real mess. So avoid a bunch of family conflict and just get the paperwork done as soon as possible. That is my recommendation. I just want to close this part of the presentation here with an additional picture showing the differences between the beta amyloid plaques and the tau tangles and what they look like not only on the scan but what they look like in the cell. So you can see that the plaques actually build up outside the cells and the tangles are actually within the cells, causing problems with the transport of nutrients to the cell. And you can see how the pathways are affected because of this housekeeping problem, is the only way I really can make a good analogy for what goes on with the brain as we age. And I'm going to close it here so y'all can go back and review this information. And I will be hopefully having part 2 up by Friday. That is the goal. And this may go into more than 2 sections based on all of the information that I'm finding. But I want you to have a good handle on it and a good grasp of it. If you have any questions, be sure to get them to me. You can email me at rn4ahealthieryou. I will put my email at the bottom for you so you can email me with any questions. I'll be more than happy to answer them. Just make sure you flag in the email that you have a question about the presentation so I don't just delete it with all of the massive number of junk emails that I get. I want to make sure that I answer your questions and help you out as much as I can on these topics because they're difficult and there's nothing easy about it. But I'm here for you, and I want you to know that. So, any questions that you have, make sure that you let me know, and I'll be more than happy to get answers for you if I can't find them myself. But as much experience as I'm getting with these diseases, I pretty much can have been through a majority of this already. But I'm here for you if you need to ask any questions or you need clarification about something or you are interested in getting more information about something I covered, such as the um, GPS device that I used for my mom, I can get that information for you if it's something that you're interested in. So until next time, guys, just read this information and go through it and digest it, and just in a few days, you'll have part 2. Have a great week. Bye.